And welcome everybody to the introduction to the Juvenile Justice Toolkit. We've provided the webpage address here, parentcenterhub.org, Juvenile Justice Toolkit, which is being presented to you by the SIPR. And our presenters today are Ana Espada, Advocates for Children of New York, Carolyn Hayer with SPAN, Parent Advocacy Network, Susan Henderson with Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, Curtis Jones at Mission Empower, and Peg Kinsel with SPAN's Parent Advocacy Network. And I'm going to hand off to Carolyn Hayer to start off our sound check, our presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're so glad that you can join us. We're glad that we had so many people having interest in this topic. We know that parent centers are dealing with the issue of justice-involved youth on a daily basis, and the SIPR has put together this toolkit to offer some resources and tools that you will be able to use in your work. I'm going to just take a few minutes and tell you a little bit about how this came to be and focus on these 4 key areas. So as you all know, students with disabilities who are charged with or convicted of a crime still have rights under the IDEA, under Section 504, and or the ADA. And as parent centers, we have an important role in providing technical assistance, which is defined here as activities that will increase the knowledge, skills, and capacity of families to work through these systems. So there are some activities that your center can organize and participate in to build your staff's capacity to provide technical assistance for juvenile justice involved youth and their families. So starting off with capacity building, it's really important that you as a team clarify internally what it is that your center can and cannot provide for families that are juvenile justice involved. Later on today, we're going to talk a little bit about potential partners that you can collaborate with in this work. We're going to talk about some of the ways that you can provide staff development to your team so that they can be responsive to these calls and inquiries when they come into your center. And we are going to give you a lot of information about the links and resources that have been compiled by the SIPR so that you will have materials, resources, and tools to share with families who are reaching out to you. In addition, we're going to talk a little bit about outreach, how you can let the community know through various means how your center can help with families that are dealing with these issues. And again, how you can partner with other organizations that are doing this work. There's a training component. So we're starting with this primarily to make sure that centers have access to some of the tools and resources that can support you in this work. And Peg will be on later to talk a little bit about what that process is and how to navigate through it, and how varied the process is from state to state. And then lastly, there's individual assistance. Susan will tell us some of the key questions that you can ask families who are contacting you for assistance and how you can provide resources to those families when they reach out to you. So that's a brief overview of today's webinar. And without any further ado, I'm going to turn the call over, but I do want to also let you know that we have presenters who are going to share some examples of 2 parent centers that are doing this work, and they're going to share some of their experiences with you. So next up, I'm going to turn the call over to Peg Kinsel, who's going to talk about the juvenile justice process. Peg?
Oh, sorry, hold on. We have to unmute. Peg, can you unmute?
I'm now. Yes, I can now. It wouldn't let me.
And now, here's Peg.
No, thanks for the dead air. I apologize for that, but we're all kind of, uh-oh. Am I there?
Yes.
I'm sorry, we're glitching.
Don't
We're in the
worry,
middle
I'll
of
edit this all
electrical
out.
storm. Yes, just throw up a hallelujah sign or something. We're in the middle of electric storm and having a bit of a glitch. So thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to discuss the juvenile justice process. And in this very brief overview, you'll start to see some of what the work group tackled as we began to create this toolbox. First, there are many areas of interest and concern and impact for justice-involved youth across the country. They also vary widely by region, by state, or local jurisdiction. And that became part of our issue as we tried to gather resources that were applicable to the centers across the country, but that could be useful to you and the work you're doing. So as usual, like our work with education, we start with the federal law. The Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Act, known moving forward as the JJDPA, was first enacted in 1974, and that focus was on deinstitutionalization. So there should be a federal standard that needed to be established for the care and custody of these youth. That we needed to uphold the interests of a safe community, but also prevent victimization of the children as well as community members. This takes on a formula grant type of production, and all the states that provide a plan and a willingness to comply with the tenets and regulations of the law get funding through the JJDPA. It has four core outcomes that have to be met, and again, we're going to kick you back to the toolbox with everything we talk about. You can get all of the information as far as the federal act, and we await reauthorization again. It's been a while, but you guys know that story too. So in fiscal year 2018, there's only 3 non-participating states plus America Samoa: Connecticut, Nebraska, and Wyoming. And in their formula grant process, they have an application then to other agencies, state agencies, nonprofits, et cetera, if they want to fill kind of that gap of services. The 2 flow charts in the PowerPoint, the very first one is here from OJJDP, which is the Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention. And this is really kind of just to give you an idea, because if you've seen one flow chart on JJ, you've seen one flow chart. So with a focus on diversion away from custody, especially for status offenders, and unnecessary labeling process as far as labeling them delinquent, from where you're working, it's important to try to understand or kind of wrap your hands around this process. The majority of delinquency cases that are referred to courts by law enforcement, that's about 80%. Approximately 20% are referred by law enforcement that are status offenders. And then the remainder of the status offenders are referred typically by child welfare agencies, other departments in the state, schools, etc. Are you confused yet? Okay, so let's talk about a few of the definitions that go through here. A status offense is illegal only because the individual committing the act is a juvenile. So these are your runaway charges, your truancy charges, curfew, the ungovernable or incorrigible, and that's what status offense. So originally, one of the things the federal law tried to do is make sure that we weren't confining, especially in secure detention, people that were status quote-unquote offenders. A delinquent offense is an act committed by a juvenile that would be a misdemeanor or felony if committed by an adult. So it can be designated as a crime, and here, again, is where your locality makes a difference: by the state law, by a city ordinance, by a county, by the town, and of course, federal law applies as well. So what some of the other pieces as you go through this flow chart, and this, I'm only really hitting the surface of this, is that each one of these definitions means something different in the juvenile justice world. So both of these links and flow charts will link you back to definitions and understanding of what some of this means. So for example, the juvenile adjudication is a formal finding. So that's, in the adult world, would be the conviction. The disposition is a sentence. So sentencing options and those kind of things you'll get discussed later with what some of the centers are doing, but that's also determined by jurisdiction. The word petition is the same as complaint. So the charging document is what petition's called in the JJ world. And then we have diversion, and diversion, some states are really proactive in doing a lot of diversion, but then it's whether it's station house diversion, whether it's court diverted juveniles, and then there's always coming back to who actually gets the opportunity to participate in diversion programs, and it tends to be, again, an overrepresentation issue and an issue of access to defense attorneys. So part of my time's up already, so we have not really discussed transfer to adult court, restorative justice options, custodial care, secure versus residential or treatment programs. So I'm going to push you right back to the toolbox again. All that information's in there. You have to do your own homework though. So this second example from the National Juvenile Defenders Coalition is a great flow chart. And we have a version that you can edit to your own local jurisdiction and kind of fill in the boxes as they apply, and as you find out what happens in your local community, you know, the jail versus prison, the different kind of diversion programs, and where your access to resources are. So in that, I am going to thank you for your time. I'm going to send you to Susan, and welcome, Susan Henderson.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for that, Peggy. So I'm going to go over the materials in section 3, which are sample questions that you can use during intake. There are 2 documents in that section. The one is sample questions to consider asking when a parent calls about an arrest, and juvenile justice parent center intake questions. And I think the important thing to remember is that these questions are intended for our staff to help parents focus on the educational needs and rights of their child after they've been either arrested or they're threatened with an arrest, or maybe even before that. But so parents, because often the educational issues are the last thing that parents are thinking about, but we know that, one, special education rights and responsibilities can assist in these incidences, and also that even if a child does end up in some sort of detention, that their education needs to continue and they have a right to their specialized education or their 504 plan if they are detained. So anyway, on to the next slide. One of the things to think about, and is to reiterate what Carolyn said earlier, is to make sure that parents know what your center can and can't help with. I mean, when parents are calling after their child's been detained or they find out their child may be arrested, they're looking for all the help they can get. They're frantic. They may not be thinking clearly, you know, all sorts of things. So this is to make sure that they know that we're not criminal defense attorneys, though we may be able to give them referrals to criminal defense attorneys, you know, that kind of thing. So just make sure that they know at the beginning of the call what you can and cannot help with. We'll talk about, you know, those kinds of referrals a little bit later, because you'll get to know them as you're doing outreach about your programs, you know, how you can help, and building collaborations and coming to know what the resources are in the community, so you can help families with the other issues that they need. Okay, next slide. So I'm just going to go over a few of the questions that are in the toolkit right now. And like I said, these are questions that are designed to help parents focus on their kids' needs while they're undergoing some kind of juvenile justice process. First, these questions are on top of the typical questions that the intake staff would be asking in the first place. You know, finding out if the caller is the person who holds educational rights, where they're calling from, what school district they're in, whether their child is 18 years old or older, things like that. So one of the first questions that we ask is, does your child have an IEP or 504 already, or were they in the process of that, or do you think they should have been in the process? Did the school have a reason to believe that your child should have been evaluated? And then the next three questions are questions that families are going to need to know the answers for when they talk to a lawyer. And it's not always clear. We've gotten calls from parents who don't know where the incident happened. All they know is their child's ended up has been taken to the police station, or a police officer and knocks on the door at 7:30 at night, looking for the child. So the things for parents to get answers to is, was the incident that triggered the arrest, where did it occur? Was it at school? Was it outside of school? Was the child on the way to or from school? And was it related to something that happened at school? Was the child interrogated by an administrator at the school, or was it a police officer or a school resource officer, who's also actually a police officer in most cases? If they don't know where their child is, do they know if the child's in jail? Has the child been charged? Is the child going to be charged? Okay, next. Remember, if the child's over 18, the family needs to know that they have limited access to information unless they get the attorney involved and permission from the child to share that information. One of the call questions that we get a lot outside of, the initial arrest is a parent calls and says, my child's in jail. And oftentimes this is a child over 18. And they're in jail and they've been denied access to medication. I mean, we've had calls about insulin, we've had calls about ADHD meds, antidepressants, etc. So, make sure that the police department and the attorneys for your child know what medications the child might need to know about. Ask the parent if they've called an IEP meeting as a result of the issue. Is there something that the IEP team can do and identify if the child isn't already in jail, but even if they are, that they can address some of the behavior and also the educational needs while the kid's incarcerated. Next. If the child's going to be in detention for more than a few days, the parent needs to know that the school district is probably not the primary point of contact, and it's the County Office of Education. At least in California and many states, it's the County Office of Ed. That may differ by state. That's something, as Peg was going over, you need to find out who's responsible when a child's incarcerated. In local jails across California, it's the County Office of Ed, but if they end up going to a state-run facility, it becomes the California Department of Education. Do you need our help? Ask the parent if they need help to know what the policies and procedures are for IEP when the child's going through this system, and help them know, ask them if they know who to contact at juvenile hall for special education support. Often, I'm guessing most parents do not know that information. Interestingly, at DREDF, most of the calls we get about kids who have been arrested are because we've already worked with the families, and it's usually families we've worked with because they have behavior and discipline issues at school, and it's just escalated. So that's how they come to us. But we also, so they rely on us to have this information for them. Next slide. Like I said, if they don't know who to contact, do they need help finding that contact? I know I'm out of time, but there's only a couple questions left. Are there professionals that you've been working with who have been working with your child who might be able to provide important information to the court, including all the lawyers on both sides? And do you have any assessments or evaluations done that would help the court and your child's attorneys understand their needs better? So these are really all questions intended to get at the educational needs and possibly the behavior that resulted in the arrest or potential arrest of your child. Now, Anna Espada from Advocates for Children in New York is going to talk about their school justice project and specifics, going over some specifics about what happens when a parent calls their center. Anna?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Advocates for Children does not represent youth in family or criminal court who are arrested. We work with students excluded from school due to their behavior, facing suspension, or are involved in the juvenile or criminal court system to get support they need to address their academic and behavioral needs and succeed in school. In that context, we typically learn from a parent that their child has been arrested when the child has been simultaneously suspended for school for the same incident. If they've been suspended for a serious offense, we will ask if the student was arrested. In addition, when a student is suspended from school, we will tell the parent that they're entitled to documents related to the student's suspension. It's called a suspension packet. It's the evidence that the school will present at the hearing to get the charge sustained. Ask for these documents only if the parent requests it prior to the hearing. In these documents is a report that indicates if the police were called. If the police were called, we'll ask the parent if the student was arrested. It's important for us to ask this age of the student at the arrest, since New York's raise the age legislation does not begin to ease into effect until January 2017. Therefore, New York still automatically prosecutes all youth 16-year-old and older as adults. This means the students 16 and older who are arrested are prosecuted in the adult criminal court, while students under 16 who are arrested see a probation officer and subsequently may be prosecuted in the family court. If the student is 16 or older, we search a state online database called WebScrims for information about the criminal case, including the charge, the appearance date and status of the case, including whether the student was indicted on felony charges and is being prosecuted in Supreme Court. After learning about the arrest, we ask questions such as, where's the child now? Was your child on Rikers Island, which is the adult jail, or in the juvenile detention facility? Has your child been in front of a judge? Does your child have a lawyer? Who is the lawyer, and what's the lawyer's phone number, email address, and legal organization? What are the criminal charges, if any? Is your child being suspended from school? What happened? Did you get a suspension notice? Can you send it to us? Did you get the suspension packet from school? If not, we tell the family how to get it. Is the criminal charge related to the suspension? Does the incident involve someone from school? Did the incident occur in school? Is there an order of protection for your child to stay away from another student and or school? Because we have a long history of advocacy for the educational rights of court-involved youth. You could change the slide. We're not involved in New York's juvenile justice or criminal justice system, although we've had past partnerships with New York City's family courts. From our work with families or students involved in the justice system, we became aware of the systemic barriers to an appropriate education that these students face. And in 2004, we partnered with the Legal Aid Society of New York and a law firm to bring a federal class action suit on behalf of New York City students 7 to 21 years old who were being detained or placed in custody as a result of involvement with juvenile or adult systems. The lawsuit is known as J, G, and Mills, and it alleged that when these students were released from a court-ordered setting, they were denied timely re-enrollment in New York City schools or were warehoused in alternative settings and provided inadequate educational services. The complaint also alleged that court-involved youth with disabilities did not receive adequate educational services while in detention in New York City, and this lawsuit helped to bring significant improvements to the educational services provided for court-involved youth in New York City. It challenged both the New York City Department of Education and the New York State Department of Education, and in 2008, the plaintiff settled with New York State with respect to claims of deficient oversight. And following a period of monitoring, the state settlement ended, and in 2011, the plaintiff settled with New York City Department of Education. There have been a lot of changes because of this, including in what we call transfers regulations, which are the rules governing suspensions that have been incorporated with the JD settlement. For example, the regulation governing student readmission specifically requires appropriate educational placements for all students returning to school from court involvement settings, and it also provides that students who have enrolled in New York City school at the time of discharge to a court-ordered setting have the right to return to school if they return within a certain period of time. Advocates for Children's contact information is first on the list of the organizations that provide representation at suspension hearings. In the letter generated by New York City Department of Education, you could change the slide, that every family receives when a student is subject to suspension for more than 5 days. Additionally, the staff is well respected by DOE staff in the suspension hearing offices throughout the city and regularly receives referrals from hearing officers and professionals of other organizations. Sometimes family who call us about a suspension will have juvenile justice issues as well. We've developed partnerships with organizations that serve court-involved youth, and these organizations know that they can refer families to us for assistance. Additionally, the staff conducts outreach and workshops and distributes guidebooks and fact sheets on legal rights and other information relevant to students who are court-involved. Our staff conducts outreach and workshops for the rights of students facing discipline, school discipline, students with behavioral and special education needs, students who are court involved, and students involved in bullying incidents. Our workshop and informational materials prepare parents, students, and professionals at social service agencies, community-based organizations, hospitals, and courts to advocate for student rights and additional behavioral support. We provide workshops on an array of topics, including the protections afforded students with disability, the rights of students facing suspensions, classroom removals or expulsions, when and how to invoke special protections for students with disabilities facing disciplinary action, how to access academic and behavioral intervention services, and supports to help students who are struggling with their behavior, the educational rights of students involved in the juvenile and criminal justice system, and how to identify, prevent, and address bullying. Next slide. Workshops are individually titled to the needs of each audience and are offered in Spanish and English. Some trainings are provided as part of a series for partner organizations to increase their capacity to help family access appropriate services and supports for students with behavioral difficulties that interfere with their education. Project staff also develops informational materials such as fact sheets, guidebooks, and tips on topics related to school discipline, students with behavioral challenges, court involvement, and bullying. Our staff reads every New York and local law, state and local regulation, and state and local policy documents concerning the provision of educational programs to incarcerated and detained youth. The toolbox is perfect to get information concerning our kids at hearings. And we stay abreast of hearings and convening by the New York State Education Department, the New York Department of Ed, New York City Administration of Children's Services, the New York City Council, the New York City Department of Correction, related to the education of court-involved youth, and participate when appropriate. We read guidance packages developed by the U.S. Department of Office of Civil Rights and Department of Justice, as well as other best practices reports. And we stay up to date on changes in the juvenile and criminal justice system. that impact where New York City youth receive education when in juvenile detention or placement or incarcerated. We use all the documents that we can get our hands on to keep abreast of what's going on. We're also part of a national network of juvenile justice and educational lawyers. In this network, we have a national listserv where we share information and resources, participate in conferences and webinars, and make and receive referrals for technical assistance. In November of 2017, Advocates for Children conducted a data brief analyzing data reported by the New York City Police Department, showing that Black students are significantly overrepresented in New York Police Department child and crisis intervention incidents involving students in emotional distress sent to the hospitals for psychological evaluation. The brief examines the demographic characteristics of students involved in child in crisis interventions, as well as New York City's use of handcuffs on students as young as 5 years old. And during these incidents between July 20, 2016 and June 2017. And these documents that you see on the screen are in the toolkit. Thank you very much. Okay, that's it.
And now we're
Oh,
moving on to
Curtis.
Curtis Jones with Mission Empower.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be a part of this great work group and to be able to share what we're doing here in Erie, Pennsylvania at Mission Empower with justice-involved youth. So just to get into what I wanted to share, I want to first of all just say that our process, we are not as much directly connected as Advocates for Children of New York, like Anna was just sharing all of the plethora of things that they do specifically for justice-involved youth. We're a little bit, we deal with youth who are involved in the juvenile justice system from a bit of a different perspective. And so here at Mission Empower, what we do is was mentioned earlier in our intake process. There are particular questions we ask. For example, are the students that we're working with their families, are these students in multiple systems? And one of those systems obviously could be the juvenile justice system. So that kind of ignites a certain route and a certain customized approach that we take with that family based on how they respond to that question in particular. One of the things that we've done organizationally is we've developed a stakeholder group of a variety of community organizations, community groups, other service providers throughout our county and throughout our region to help meet the needs of our families. And one of those directly and explicitly was to bring in the Department of Juvenile Justice as a stakeholder and a major part of our team that we put together to help meet our families' needs. And so the assistant director of our local juvenile probation office is a member of our stakeholder team. We've also been very direct in developing trainings to be able to inform and empower families on how they can better understand and navigate the juvenile justice system. Just like the special education system, there's so many nuances and angles and perspectives, and depending on, again, as Peg was telling us previously, what region or what area, what state you're in directly affects how that system works. And so we have customized some trainings to be able to meet the needs of families here and to be able to, again, inform and empower them on how our system is set up so that they can easily navigate it as effectively as possible. In the rest of my couple moments here, I want to share maybe from two perspectives how we have been working with justice-involved youth here at Mission Empower. And the two words I want to share are intentionality and relationship building. So as I said before, we are really started as an advocacy organization that was just really focused on just, making sure that the students' educational rights were met. And we were just kind of really tunnel visioned and very specific in our area of service. But as we found that time has happened and time continues to elapse, that most of our families aren't involved in just one system. So we've had to expand and understand that families come to us with a variety of other sources, with other needs and with other areas that we can support them. And there are ways that we know we cannot support, so we're very good at referring out to other organizations and support groups that families can access, and we have a significant resource library of those services that are available in our area. So intentionality, some of the things that we've done to be very intentional, because again, this is not originally one of our core competencies, understanding how to work with justice-involved youth, is that we, again, brought in someone who's directly connected with juvenile probation, and they are part of our stakeholder team, so they can inform us from that perspective. Also, we've been intentional. I've been able to go, our director has sent me to the National Juvenile Justice Conference that was held in Pittsburgh a couple of years ago to, directly invest and, again, be intentional on making sure that we are having the best and most current information available to work with our families who may have a justice-involved youth. I think it's probably the greatest thing that we're doing organizationally is that we are doing a lot of significant outreach. And as I said, being intentional and involved in our community and involving ourselves in community conversations around justice-involved youth and advocating for their educational needs and making sure that they're being met, even if they are incarcerated, even if they are suspended for a significant amount of time because of, again, their involvement in the juvenile justice system. So those are some things that we're doing to be intentional with our involvement, and we're kind of spreading our wings a little bit and going beyond our core competency. Finally, relationships. So we have been really intentional, again, about creating relationships and forming relationships with organizations and other service providers specifically related to justice-involved youth in the juvenile justice program and juvenile probation in our area. So some of those relationships are we have a great rapport, again, with the juvenile probation director as well as the assistant director, with our local county prison. We have youth that are incarcerated in our county prison, and I've gone in and done sessions with them and made sure that I had conversations with their educational staff in the county to make sure that their academic needs are being met and that we're appropriately being educated based on their rights as a student in special education. Also, we have great relationship and rapport with the staff and the director of our local detention center. And these are intentional relationships that we're working to form and develop so that we can have the information that we can best serve our families. And finally, our local school district. We are working very closely with our city school district. As a matter of fact, we were a part of their latest strategic planning session, and the area that I participated in most was around disproportionality, because we're, regrettably, many of our young people are being introduced to the justice system via school behavior or school-connected behavior. And so we were actually made that a high point of emphasis and attention in the Erie School District's latest strategic planning process. So again, we've been very intentional. We've been very much focused on building relationships by putting ourselves in places that traditionally we had not been. And so those are some of the things that we're doing. And I would just want to say this too. I know we all working in this parent-centered world are always really, really, really busy and really doing a lot of stuff. But remember, you can't give what you don't have. And so just take time for yourselves as well so that we can better serve our families. Thank you for listening. And next, we'll have Susan Henderson coming back to share some more information with us.
Thank you, Curtis. That was like a perfect segue to the collaboration and coalition building. You must have planned that. That's great. So following up on what Curtis said about Mission Empower helping families navigate the juvenile justice system. I mean, we're all very comfortable with navigating the special education system. That's what we do, but we might not be so comfortable in the juvenile justice system. So we, like he said, we need to be intentional and build relationships with the groups and organizations and the public systems that are comfortable and are working in the juvenile justice system. And so those could be traditional and non-traditional partnerships that we know and or don't know. I'll just briefly tell you DREDF's work in this RPTI at DREDF. Our work started because we were working with foster youth, and we came to know social workers. Because foster youth have social workers and CASAs, and oftentimes we were finding that some of those foster youth had become juvenile justice involved, and we got to know probation officers and people working in the courts and the lawyers defending children in delinquency hearings. So we had joined a loose coalition in Alameda County where we're situated, and people were coming to those meetings, and that it was interesting because we knew very little about the juvenile justice. This is in the early 2000s. We knew little about the juvenile justice system, but on the other hand, the juvenile justice system knew very little about disability and disability rights or special education and IDEA. So what happened was there was like this great fishing ground for us to provide trainings on special education, IDEA 504, to all of these people who were involved with youth who were in detention or were in probation, and often it was related to their disability, because as we all heard, there's a very high rate of disability within the juvenile justice system. So that's when we started building our relationships, and I just have to give credit to our individual education advocates who over the years have created personal relationships with people within these systems. And that has made all the difference when a parent calls and their child has been arrested or may be arrested. Next slide. So one of the things I will reiterate what Curtis said is you need to be intentional about that, is to think about who you know and then ask them who you don't know, like who you should be reaching out to and connecting with, so you get more involved in the juvenile justice system to understand how it works and build the resources that you need to help families navigate the system when they call you. I think all of those things, two things that Curtis mentioned were, going to a conference. We have statewide juvenile justice conferences, and there's just like professionals in the special education system have ongoing professional development, so do the juvenile justice folks. And so find out about those. When you're thinking about these collaborations, it's important to know your cultures, just like it is in any other system. Think about the trauma, the long-term outcomes for the individual. That's what helps drive us, knowing that an arrest when somebody's in 9th grade has a long-term, could have a lifelong impact on them. And so knowing that makes us work even harder to make sure that the children's needs are met. Look at the data in your state to understand what's going on. We talked about that earlier. Look beyond the obvious connections. And, it's hard to tell what's obvious for one person or another, but, contact your county office of ed, who's is probably in charge of education for incarcerated youth. Get in touch with the juvenile probation department. We have trained court personnel, juvenile court personnel on special education. Look at diversion programs. There's many local diversion programs that are funded by the U.S. Department of Justice, but also the state, and receive other funding to see what they know about disability and disability rights. Connect with the lawyers who are representing children in delinquency issues. Here in Alameda County, there's an office called East Bay Children's Law Offices, and they're the ones who are assigned by the county to represent children in delinquency hearings. And we've become really great. We're on the phone with them a lot. Let's just put it that way. Talk to the sheriffs, and it's hard. We don't often reach out to sheriffs and police officers, but we have run across some really great people in those departments who have children's best interests at heart. School vice principals who are often responsible for discipline in middle school and high school. And then if you're lucky enough to have restorative justice programs in your area, connect with them, because if we can address behaviors in school, we can maybe think about stopping, the pipeline to jail. think about who else can help you help families address problematic behavior in school. Once you hear about behavior issues, discipline issues, make sure you're talking to that family about calling an IEP, getting further assessments, having behavior assessments done. Try to stop it. Anticipate that there's going to be new players in the system that you haven't worked with before, a sheriff's deputy. Give them a platform in your organization to hear their perspectives. One of the best conferences, or it wasn't, it was a task force I was involved with, was in mental health. And it was really telling to hear the county sheriff and local police departments talk about how they needed support, how they felt like they were, that their jails and their arrests were often about mental health issues, and that where we can connect with them to build stronger systematic supports in a community. Anyway, now it's back to Peg to go over some of the more materials in the toolkit.
Peg is unmuting herself. It just takes a minute.
There we go. I'm sorry. Apologize for the glitches. So really quickly, I want to go through some of the resources. If you have any questions, just type them in the chat box. I need the resource slide. So we have a robust collection of resources that we have been compiling for over a year. You can do the next slide. I want to start with just highlighting a few of them and kind of introducing this as quickly as I can. There's a state correctional education self-assessment. It's voluntary to states, but it's a great tool for you or for people involved in JJ to use. This is especially focused on the provision of special education related services to students with disabilities in correctional facilities, which we know has been a problem that's across the country. We have a resource file that is on the work group. It's been research vetted, each item through the work group for its usefulness. It's also available for download as a, what do you call it, file? There's my technology expertise for you. So what I want to tell you though is that we also have a Parent Center Hub Juvenile Justice Workspace to network and share resources, because even though we have a set file of links and resources that is very robust, we're constantly updating those. So even though the resource file sometimes takes another 72 hours to update with its definitions and descriptions, for instance, we had two, you can go ahead and change to the next slide. We had two recent, a study by UCLA and the ACLU around some of the issues with school resource officers, and just a quick statistics that there's 27,000 sworn law enforcement officers, but only 23,000 social workers in schools nationwide. So with a focus on punishment to detention to prosecution and criminalizing students, some really, really good current resources, and that's what we want to try to do, not only have the robust resources but keep this information updated. There is an article on the 2018 Stop Violence Act, which provided $75 million in funding for school resource officers, but no money for those additional support and social services supports. The other piece is an article on the bottom of this resource, the debtor's prison. That's an article and a study done by the Juvenile Law Center about the cost of incarceration for children. So when families already have a heightened economic instability, they're now being charged for quote unquote child support or the cost of the incarceration of their own youth. Fees that are too high, fines, fees for public defenders, things that don't happen in adult corrections. So that is, it's a very recent resource and highly recommended. Again, what we've tried to do, it has a map to every single state and will tell you what kind of costs you may incur in your state. All of our resources from the OSEP resources, which include policy letters, best practices, to the policy and resource and state files, we've tried to do ones that connect you to a larger either state map or links to state resources so that they become important to the work that you're doing and informational, and the data is not only just national but doesn't apply to me in, Colorado. So I want, oh my gosh, we're running it. So the other piece I wanted to say is we have really good webinars also. We have a webinar from the Juvenile Law Center on ESSA and students with juvenile justice. We have a great report from the Advocacy Institute. Also, some really good resources on juvenile justice and transition and reentry. So if I sound like a commercial, I am, because it is the place to go. Just an umbrella of resources, and we really want you to take advantage of them because we have compiled some things that really we hope will be helpful and support the work that you're doing out there. Miriam, do we have any questions from the audience? I'm trying to be mindful of the time. I don't know if somebody's typing or talking.
Hi, Peg, I don't see any questions right now. People can type their questions on the question box or on the chat box. So we have two areas where people can post comments, questions, chat box and the question box. Thank you.
Okay, then if I'm going to turn it back to Carolyn or Jessica to follow up, please reach out if there's something else we can do, and join the work group, or definitely take advantage of the toolbox because it's there for you. Thank you so much for giving us your time today, this afternoon. Jessica?
Thank you very much, Peg and Curtis and Anna and Susan and Carolyn and Miriam and everybody for attending. We have a survey that's going to send out as soon as this webinar ends, and we would very much appreciate it if you were able to fill that out. And if you want to have a copy of this presentation, it is in the handout section in PDF format. You can access any of the links from there, as well as the email addresses, as you can see here. And we also want to make sure that we add one of our people was not able to present today, but was on the work group and contributed an immense amount of time and resources and information, and that is Michelle Phillips, who can also be reached from her email address here. So thank you, everybody. And if there are no questions, I'll wait for a minute. But we don't see any questions. So there was one question: is where do I start looking for the resources for my state? Nancy Crabtree is asking.
So Nancy, I would say that depending on the subject area and the way they're broken down, and you'll see as you go through the resources, almost all of them have a link towards a map where you can click onto the state. So if it's about the cost of incarceration, if it's about collateral damage, whether it's, the national organizations, all have done a really good job about trying to make state-specific information available. But please let us know if you have any trouble navigating that.
Right. So I guess they answered all of your questions, because those are all we have. And I want to thank everybody again. And if you're in the path of the remnants of this hurricane, as we are, I hope that you stay dry. And have a good day, everybody. Thank you again so much. Take care.